We have all experienced an emotional response from a pitch sequence that defines a melody, but how often have you thought about how the instrument that performs the melody might affect our emotional experience? There is substantial evidence that timbre and pitch perceptually interact, including demonstrations of perceptual integrality, changes in the pitch of the missing fundamental, and even spectral envelope effects in the tritone paradox. Few studies have investigated timbre's contribution to perceived emotion. Perceived emotion within isolated tones has been argued to vary with instrument timbre. One study also demonstrated that the perceived emotion of melodies varied with natural and synthetic instruments. The current study aimed to confirm timbre's contribution to perceived emotion in melodies. It extended earlier work by evaluating potential effects in pitch register via octave shifts, which impact how timbre is realized. Lastly, this experiment sought to establish a spectral characteristic that might predict emotion judgments. Listeners were 16 JMU students with varied amounts of musical training. Stimuli consisted of 6 sad and 6 joyful 8-bar isolated melodic phrases from classical pieces that lab staff determined to be relatively unfamiliar. Melodies were produced by clarinet, trumpet, and violin samples. A sine wave version of each melody was also created to obtain baseline judgments with minimal timbre for comparison. Register was manipulated by transposing joyful melodies down an octave and sad melodies up an octave. For each stimulus, listeners rated the strength of the intended emotion. Each block of trials began with a sine wave baseline version of the original melody, followed by a randomized order of all remaining versions of the melody. Block order was randomized across participants. Ratings were hypothesized to decrease with transpositions consistent with incongruent spectral shifts. Ratings were also expected to vary across instrument timbres in unique ways for each intended emotion. Finally, melodies for instruments were expected to receive higher ratings than for corresponding sine wave versions, since they should be better at conveying intended emotion. As hypothesized, ratings change with both register and instrument. Transpositions, lower for joyful melodies in panel A and higher for sad melodies in panel B, were rated lower with respect to the intended emotion. As you can see in the figure, ratings also changed across instrument timbres in different ways for joyful and sad melodies. Sine waves also generally receive low ratings relative to instrument timbres. Timbre's contribution to perceived emotion and melody was confirmed. A timbre characteristic that was thought to likely be involved was perceived brightness, which often is predicted by spectral centroid measures. Yet only a weak positive correlation was found between measured centroids and ratings for joyful melodies. Thus, other timbre characteristics must have been involved. We are looking into the possibility that rise times could predict the obtained results, at least for some timbres. For now, it seems clear that research on perceived emotion in melodies should consider the impact of instrument timbre and not just pitch.